Welcome to Thinking Green. Well, this is the first live show we've done in nearly a year. I think the last time we were in the studio, it was with candidates in Willimantic for even year.
March 10th, 2020 was your last live show.
Wow.
Year and a half.
So, that said, this is not without glitches. And so, but it'll get better as the election season continues. So, as everyone knows, municipal elections are coming up, and this show is kind of an introduction to the Green Party candidates this year, and some information about the election as well. So, with me tonight are Chris Raitt, who is running for City Council, Eddie Long, who will be joining us in a moment, who is also running for City Council, and Keith Kimball, who is running for Board of Ed. So welcome onto the show. And one at a time, and I don't really care what order you go in, it would be really good to hear from each of you a little bit about yourself and like what motivated you to do something crazy like run for office. So, I don't know. Oh, you need your mic.
Who wants to jump in?
Yeah.
We're playing chicken here.
I have no problem starting with
Then
explaining
go
why
for
I
it.
ran for city council. So, like many of us in New London, I wear many hats. My name is Eddie Long, and I'm running for New London City Council. Like many of us in New London, I wear many hats and am involved in many groups and organizations, and you just start to see a pattern of things that you think you'd like to see addressed that aren't getting addressed. You see a pattern of groups of people not being paid attention to or taken advantage of, and it's just too much of a pattern, and so it seems like somebody from that segment should be helping to make sure the city is addressing those issues, and that's what motivated me to run.
Do you want to continue with the City Council?
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. I think that was a really nice way to start. Yeah, I'm running because I agree. I think New London residents who are suffering the most, who are struggling to make, a decent wage and support their family, I think their needs are not at the center of our current municipal city budget, and I would like to see that change.
And Keith?
I mean, it's not really any different from either Chris or Eddie. Public education is very important to me. I've lived in New London for 30 years. I'm a product of New London High School. Granted, it was my senior year.
I think that's when I met you too.
Yeah, you met me a long time ago, and through living here a long time and being very interested in politics and government in general, I got to know many of the board members, and I got to see how it worked, and I also got to see how it wasn't working. I have a child in third grade, Pixel, who's goes to Jennings. And, I just, for whatever reason, and I have a lot of respect for the members of our City Council and our Board of Ed, but for whatever reason, not enough's getting done. I can't pretend to know why that is, but I know it's not getting done. And I have ideas, and I have the time, and I have the suit. So,
unlike some Green Party candidates in the past.
Right.
Well, to me, as not an outsider, but as a non-candidate this year, it's very interesting to me. I've been sort of involved with the Green Party for 20 years, and we first ran candidates in 2001 for City Council, and this is the first election since 2001 that all three of our candidates have never run before. So for me to watch people from the community having their own passions and ideas being interested in getting into electoral politics is really kind of encouraging, because so often those who are active in the communities in different ways, either through activism or through the cultural life of our community, don't really want to get involved in the politics of it. And for me, it's just really interesting and kind of gratifying to see that there is, I'm not saying a new generation, because none of you are like 19, but
Was that a dig?
to me, no. You're only old enough, young enough to be my kid, not young enough to be my grandkids.
A little far removed from 19.
Yeah.
I am.
Right.
So I guess we can kind of plunge into some of the issues and perspectives, because we felt from the beginning that the Green Party does offer an alternative, a real alternative to the major parties. And I know that many people see the Republicans and Democrats as being very different from each other, but in some ways, from our Green perspective, they're not different enough from each other, and a whole new perspective is needed. So do any of you want to suggest a first issue to talk about, or do you want me to throw one out?
I think you brought up a good first issue to tackle, which is the idea that in an election season, all of the candidates for a party would be new candidates, new to the political arena. I've heard, like a lot of people, that all politics are local. So, you can be driven by what's happening nationally to get active locally. And I don't know if that's exactly what happened to me, but it's sort of like a pattern that there's things happening in the country you can't not pay attention to. And then if you're even sort of active in the community, you can draw a real connection to your city, and then it just goes from there. And I think that might be happening across the country.
I hope it is. And another thing that's interesting to me is that all three of you do have activism in different areas with different groups of people. So there are a lot of people in the city who are not really being represented, and it isn't a monolithic group at all. It's a very heterogeneous group with different interests.
Yeah, I think that's one of my hopes, and I think all of our hopes for this campaign is that we will, yes, we are running for seats in November, on November 2nd, and we're also running, this campaign has a lot to do with the election 2 years from now as well, and building a base of people and getting people excited now about the possibility of just considering seeing themselves as running in 2 years from now.
Right.
So this is a much longer term, longer term work that we're doing.
And in 2 years, of course, it will be a mayoral race as well, so it might garner more attention yet. Now, Chris, I think that what has largely motivated you to run in terms of issues is public safety, and I know your views on public safety are not really the same as a lot of people who say that public safety is a big priority. So maybe share a little bit about how you view public safety and how it contrasts with what we're seeing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my campaign in many ways is about re-envisioning community safety, and I actually think I don't want anything that differently than what most people want. I think we want to be in our homes and feel safe, and like we can be ourselves in our homes. I think we want to, be able to provide food for our families, and I think we want to see our young people thrive and get to grow and be healthy and express themselves. I think we want a lot of the same things, but as the Green Party has taught me, I don't think we always fund what we really value. And so in re-envisioning community safety, which I think is actually pretty easy to do since the People's Budget asked around 1,000 New London residents to tell us about their needs. I think if we did that, we might just really examine how to budget for the needs of New Londoners in a way that centers community safety just in a different way. And stops criminalizing conflict, I guess, is another piece of it.
Right.
But,
And, stops criminalizing kids.
right.
I've been interested in drug policy and the drug war for, 15 years or so. And, I lived in Waterford when my kids were teens, and I've met a lot of young people in their 40s who grew up in places like Stonington and, other suburban places. And, they use drugs more than city kids. I mean,
Right.
there have been studies
Statistically,
that,
yes.
that suburban kids use drugs more than city kids. But they're not policed the same way. And I was talking to one young man who said, I grew up in Stonington. I'd smoke pot on my porch all the time. I never saw a police car.
Right.
And yet poor kids who live in maybe subsidized housing in New London, there's going to be follow-up. Their families could actually lose their homes.
Right.
And
Or they could lose the family unit
Yeah.
that
In
is also
general.
true.
if there's an offense or a crime inside of a home. Who knows how far up the repercussions will go, and what organizations are involved in that. I mean, it isn't just the individual that is affected by hysteria
Right.
around that issue, the drug issue and the over policing of it. If you take a man and put him in jail, there is a breadwinner out of the home. And even in instances where the female or the woman is the breadwinner, there's always help needed. I mean, it's just, it's devastating to the family unit in general when that happens, to say nothing about, what it does to the individual himself who may be in jail and unable to provide for his family.
Yeah. So it begs the question, like, how do we invest in our community members' needs before they're in crisis? Like, right? Before we need emergency intervention, like, how do we invest in our community members in a preventative way to minimize the crises where we need emergency response?
I wonder how much schooling can affect this. I remember a long time ago when I was weighing if I wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Ron Paul. One of the things that really turned me off to Hillary Clinton way back in 2006 was her, she just went after video games as like the reason that kids were bad. And it's like, how can you be more out of touch? And this argument now, or this topic now about, TikTok proliferating all of these challenges. I mean, I don't know how we wound up in a situation where you're perceived as cool by your peers and peers that you've never met around the country if you destroy school property. But we are here, we're there. And so it feels the same that, man, it would be easy as a candidate to just say, let's rally against TikTok, but that's ridiculous. There's something else missing, and I wonder, I know that it's in the House that needs to be addressed, but I mean, I wonder
Right.
what the school's opinion of that is.
Well, I mean, we know there's wrong ways to do it. We have some pretty good data about the school to prison pipeline, which speaks to what Chris is talking about in some cases, just like overbearing laws and policies that don't solve the problem at all, right? And I like how you phrased it, preventative, because we know in healthcare it's always cheaper and more effective to get ahead of your health preventatively, right? It's one of the big points in favor of a public health care system, a strong, robust public health care system. But one of the things that Chris has repeatedly brought up to me, and I think it's excellent, I'm just not the expert on the subject that she is, but you know, engaging in restorative justice and restorative practices. You know, I think we're both on the same page, you know, and how we want to approach it. But she definitely has more insight into the specifics of that. But it's certainly something that I'm interested in exploring further, you know, whether I get elected or not, you know, because the more I can learn about restorative practices, you know, as a mediation tool, as a, you know, solving, you know, everybody's problem. But you know, we were talking about the dirt bike and the all-terrain vehicles, you know, in public, and you know, we both believe that, you know, in an urban space where kids don't have much outdoor space for recreation,
Right.
you know, there's obviously demand for it. It's legal to have an ATV. You would think so. From the way some of the people have been talking on social media or some of the messages we've gotten from NLPD. But it's legal to have one, and it's legal to do in the right circumstances. And if you live in Jewett City, you've got no problem. If you live in Waterford, there's plenty of places that you can go. But if you live in New London, you're in trouble. And it's just, we know that prohibition and draconian, you know, zero tolerance enforcement never works. Not in this country. So why would we think that it would work any better now? No, we can see that there's demand for this activity. It's popular among teenagers and young adults. I know guys in their 30s are popular with, you know.
Yeah.
You know, we need to explore at spaces where we can provide a legal outlet for them to do that. First, let's say you can't do that here, you know. When has that ever worked with a teenager?
It doesn't work with anyone. It doesn't work with anyone. I mean, wagging your finger and
Right.
saying don't do this.
It doesn't work.
It's the cookie jar theory. If you say don't eat the cookies in the cookie jar, as soon as the responsible adult's out of the room,
Right.
the kids got designs on how to get to that cookie jar.
I'm Italian American. There was always Italian American. There was always wine on the table. You know, I never cared about drinking in high school because
Yeah.
it was always at home.
Yeah, that's
You know, my friends were like, I'm like, no, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I feel it's just interesting to think about like what a budget would look like that would help our young people to feel like cherished in New London. And I don't think they feel like that.
Yeah.
I think they feel like we criticize them at every turn. Anything they do, they're either apathetic and checked out and on their phones. They're violent because they're bored.
Or video games.
Or
they're on the
everyone's
video
looking at the
games, they're-
gateways, but really the basic gateway is trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, it isn't video games. It isn't really, you know,
an app on your phone.
it isn't cannabis. It's trauma.
And one of the major traumas that New London young people share fairly across the board is racism. And racism was declared a public health crisis in New London last summer, July.
Yep.
The city council unanimously declared racism a public health crisis. But what has been done since then to begin taking baby steps? I'm not saying we eradicate a public health crisis overnight, but are we allocating the proper resources that need to be allocated to address a public health crisis preventatively, like you made that really apt connection, right, to the
Preventative,
healthcare
right.
system.
Well, you actually made it. I'm just agreeing with you.
Well, so hand in hand with the public safety issue, we've among us talked a lot about like housing in New London, and you know, we have seen a tremendous amount of development of apartments that are really nice, and they're pretty, you know, fully occupied, and hopefully are taking some of the like commuter traffic off the road, but rents have gotten really high, and
when the landlord is interested in getting someone to occupy the building and charging them rent, it is high.
Yeah.
we actually had that experience looking for an office. I guess, you know, any time is good to tell people we do have a campaign office. It's at 312 State Street, which is the former Hannafins or the former Debs.
And right beside the draft choice.
And right,
And right beside
yeah.
the draft house. Across the
So
garden.
we will be having an open house next week. Needs a little bit of cleaning up first, But we talked to a lot of landlords with empty spaces who did not want to rent it for, it wasn't for free. We were paying, and they wanted only long-term rentals and $2,000 a month. And we found some place, but I'm thinking about all the residents of New London who, make a difference here, who might be getting pushed out of their homes. I mean, our office is not a big deal, but people who call New London homes having trouble finding places to live.
Well, that's a good point. People may be being pushed out of their homes, but if not pushed out of their homes, some people are being pushed out of their businesses, right? That's their way of life. That's their identity. And that you could live in a city that could just dismiss and destroy your identity is alarming to me. It does happen. It's called gentrification, and it is something that New London suffers from. It isn't often addressed, but it needs to be, even in newspaper articles about businesses that go under because of gentrification. The word gentrification isn't used, and then sometimes the articles don't even mention the business that has been closed. It is a subject that is sensitive for me. If I'm being honest, we started by talking about what caused us to run. And the idea that I live in a city where gentrification is prevalent and responsible for some of my friends losing their business, it pushed me into running. It pushed me into running. It put me over the edge.
Well, you've kind of described yourself as being, a candidate from the arts community and representing the arts community.
Absolutely.
So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that and how our, housing policy is impacting the arts in our city.
Well, I think the larger picture around housing, housing is a specific topic, but it's still affected by the larger picture, which is, sort of damaging to our business sector. But yes, very specifically, I would like to make the case for an arts-based candidate in New London, because if I was running in Detroit, I'd be expected to talk about the auto industry, and if I didn't, I should expect to lose. But I don't live in Detroit, I live in New London. So I should be expected to talk about the arts industry. And if I don't, I should lose. And that's the whole reason I'm here, really, is because it doesn't take long to draw a connection from art to any of the issues that candidates would be expected to address this year. And so I think that in a town like New London, this is probably the best point I could make. We're close to 50% of our businesses that are active downtown being arts related. And once we lose Liberty City Bank, or Liberty Bank, once we lose Liberty Bank, we'll be close to 50%. We'll be pretty much at 50%. So in a town where you can point to a specific industry as being representative of 50% of the businesses in your downtown area, the idea that that industry, in this case art, is an economic driver is non-negotiable. It absolutely is. And so I think that as Keith said, even if I don't win, if I can make it so that candidates understand that in this town, if you want to run, when you sit down to write your platform, you need to consider art. And if you don't, then you shouldn't win.
Right.
Well, New London has been designated a distressed city, so everyone is talking about economic development because, our per capita family income is about half of the state average. I think it's just under 40,000, and the state average is 70-something thousand. The Community Land Trust did some research a few years ago on that. So economic development is uppermost on people's minds, but I hope something the Green Party brings to the discussion that's a little different from many other candidates is not, well, we just need to cater to the EB workforce and the hospital workforce because they're the big employers in town. And it's true, they're the big employers in town, but as you pointed out, all these little arts-related businesses aggregate to being a pretty
Oh, yeah.
big employer in town.
I could go on forever. And let's make a distinction, an important distinction between the employer who has the most employees and the biggest industry, right? New London could get its own basketball team, and then there would be an arena, and then that may be the highest employed, company in the town, but it wouldn't be the biggest industry. And is there not precedent with this, where we rely on a specific company to drive our economy, and then maybe we give them something like a tax incentive, and then the tax incentive expires,
So do they.
and then so does our relationship with that company.
Right, and those large employers employ a very small percentage of New London residents.
Right.
And local
And-
businesses have that multiplier effect too. A small business, they'll hire a local accountant, they'll have local attorneys, they'll get their printing and materials locally, whereas a multinational that just has a facility here is doing all of that in bulk from their headquarters. And who knows where the money is really going, but most of it is not circulating in our city.
Right. And I mean, if I could put my corporate accountant hat on, not that I want to speak too much to city council issues, but this is a mistake that's been made over and over and over again with city government is, you mentioned tax incentives like, deferrals and, if the business can't pay its business taxes, there's no demand for that business. Right, and that's why they go. They come for the incentives,
Right.
because that makes them viable here. And when those incentives leave, it doesn't. Pfizer paid for that facility with the tax deferrals.
Right.
I mean, and it was enough to pay for that building. And thankfully, we got EB to step in there. But we have an oversupply of housing in New London, and the only reason we have so many condominiums is because they've been paying people with public money to build condominiums that we don't need. What we have a shortage of is affordable housing
Right.
in
Right.
the city, right? And that's that's the issue is like so people sometimes I bring this up in conversations around town and to our officials like, well, what should we be doing? It's like, well, this has actually been done in plenty other cities that needed to redevelop their economy. You improve the city. The businesses come when the city is a good place to live in, right? So you improve the schools. Here I am, hoping to do that for you. You improve infrastructure, right? You get rid of dilapidated buildings. You bring them down, open that space up so it doesn't cost as much for the guy to develop it coming in.
Yes.
Right? We still haven't sold the theater on Bank Street because nobody can afford to clean it up. It needs to come down. Things like that. Improve your infrastructure, make your city safe. These are things that people want, and nobody wants to go into a city that where people are dissatisfied with the schools, dissatisfied with the services, are afraid of racism.
And looks empty.
Right, and it looks empty because of it. But yeah, I mean, arts, it attracts tremendous amount of business. It attracts tremendous amount of amazing artists. It's a jewel in New London, and we should take it seriously. Candidates should take it seriously.
And one of the things I know, as city councilors, Eddie and I wouldn't get to make, sort of a lot of detailed decisions about New London Public Schools, but we do have a say in the budget.
Right.
Right? And so, I'm incredibly invested in thinking really critically about, isn't good economic development where a community invests properly in its
Right.
young people?
Right.
And, I'm not saying that there aren't areas to improve and examine the ways in which spending's happening at New London Public Schools. And the percentage of our budget we give to education is much lower than similar sized communities in the state who have, supposedly the best education. So I think, I'll really, I think both of us will look to you for a lot of guidance on how to make sure students and staff are actually getting the money
Yeah.
they need to build schools that celebrate education for our young people.
I'm excited about that effort. I'm excited about the the potential, to have a seat at the table and to be able to work with other people that I can caucus. I know there's people on the Board of Ed right now who are waiting for someone like me to work with them. We talked a lot about the differences between the Green parties and the other parties, but at the local level, most of what I see is there's not a whole lot of difference between Democrats, Republicans, or Greens. We really do want the same things. You go, regardless of party affiliation, if you look at my platform and you gave it to anybody blind without my name or party on it, it's like, I want to do these things.
Right.
Republican, Democrat, Green, Libertarian, they say, yeah, that's what I want in our public schools. My top 3 platform items are, ensuring that we get adequate resources and that they're distributed, effectively, to all the students in New London, all the schools in New London.
Oh, equity.
Equity, as another word for that.
Big fan of equity.
Big fan of equity. Every parent's going to agree. It's like, yeah, it's like the school budget is always eviscerated, and I want that. The Board of Ed will tell you that that's what they want too. Every member, Republican, Democrat, they're going to tell you that. From my own experience as a parent in the school system and talking with other parents, communication between the district and the families is a big problem. We don't get the right information at the right time. I mean, I can go on and on. I go out in public and I mention that I want to improve communication between administration and the families. Most people are pretty satisfied with our teachers, with our faculty. There's always problems, but as a general rule, I've had very little problem. In fact, they tend to over communicate to compensate for what's lacking in administration. But I get, despite my own experiences, people are making me aware of new things all the time that I hadn't considered.
Right.
Like the fact that we have a messaging system that utilizes text, voicemail, and email. Right. Well, you used to get 3 messages 3 ways. I don't know why all the surveys that we get out, we can't find out what your preferred method is and select that. But fine, I'd rather have too much than too little. You know what's happening this year though? You get a text message, you get a voice message. You know what it tells you? Check your email. What is the point of that? And it's frustrating for parents. I talked to a guy
That's a good question.
at Step Up New London, and he's like, I gave him that email because they asked me to. I don't even know how to check it.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't use that email. I'd rather just get, and we used to, and whatever you found first, you got the message, and that was great, and it worked. It's not more expensive. It can't be a burden on, somebody had to write the message for the email, right?
Yeah, who's that person?
So, the message is already there. Somebody needs to speak it into a phone and type it into a text message. That's pointless. It's pointless, it's confusing, and it's frustrating for families. It doesn't cost 1 iota more.
It's all,
But Democrats and Republicans would agree.
right.
You know what I mean? And so whether or not I'm a Green shouldn't be your concern. What should be your concern between me and Eddie and Chris is, do you share our same visions? Do we represent you? Right? And do you think that we have a plan? Do you think that we're motivated and that we're capable of doing the things that we say we do?
Well, I would point to, that's a great way to segue into a big point I want to make, which is the 2-party system.
Happy to help you out.
You said that as a Green Party candidate, what you're looking for out of for the education system in London is pretty much in line with what a lot of Democrats and Republicans want.
Yeah.
So then what the hell is the problem? The problem is it's actually not a benefit that Republicans and Democrats see eye to eye on so many things. So then you'd think we can get all these policies passed and everything is just Shangri-La. But they're inhibited by that because those 2 parties have people that they need to answer to. And I feel like that is my favorite part of the Green Party.
Mine
that
too.
the only people we need to answer to are the people. There's nobody chirping in my ear about what I should feel about a certain policy, and so I am free to ask the people how they
We
feel.
do talk endlessly about them, however.
But it's just a great point to make that as a Green Party candidate, what you want for education is very similar to what Democrats and Republicans want. But you're free to figure out the creative ways to get there.
Right.
They may want those things, but if there's somebody telling them that they can't take a certain approach or go down a certain road, then they will not. And then the policy doesn't get passed, and then the people suffer. And
That's
I
right.
feel like we are we are not uninhibited by that fact. We can just respond to the people.
We're going straight to our neighbors.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
we're here to represent you.
And to connect to what you said before, something that's frustrating to the teachers that the administrative side in education is taken care of is also frustrating to the parents. And so there's some synergy there that needs to be capitalized on.
Right.
A lot of times you may associate the teacher with the administrative board of the school, and that isn't something you should be doing.
No.
Because a lot of times the people, the voters, the parents, have an issue with the school board, and guess what? You've got an ally in the teacher.
Right.
And the Board of Ed too is you know, it's distinct entity, and sometimes people lump them all together. I mean, they're the executive branch, but you know, some of the things that parents are frustrated with, I know parents on the Board of Ed, they're frustrated with it too. Believe me, you know. But again, like you said, there's politics in play that we don't engage in. You know, we're interested in being representatives.
Yeah, a diversity of thought, a diversity of party is good for democracy. Like when there is one party control, then decisions get to be made outside of the, you know, eye of the public, without consideration of how that's going to impact residents, and that needs to change. So yes, vote for us because you like us individually and that our views represent yours, but I do think being green is something you should really consider as an advantage in voting for us, because we will help bring about voices of accountability on both the City Council and the Board of Education.
Yeah.
Maybe
do think-
maybe we should be the gray party.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to policy, things are black and white,
Right.
Yeah.
and we don't believe in
Well,
that.
Right.
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 Maybe we should be the gray party. That's where we
Yeah.
operate, in the gray area.
And one thing that is, you know, kind of liberating, whether you're a green in office or out of office, is, you know, I sometimes feel as though it's our role to like point out the elephant in the room that everyone else is ignoring.
Or the donkey in the room.
Or the donkey in the room, right? And
what you
because
mean.
sometimes there are huge issues. At a planning and zoning meeting recently, I don't remember exactly what the subject. Oh, it was back on housing, a discussion of accessory dwelling units, which is kind of a hot issue, but we won't go into it tonight. But I had to say to people who said, oh, that's a big issue for the suburbs, because the suburbs in Connecticut are so segregated. There are really like no black and brown people in them. And I had to raise my hand and say, you know, New London is a small town, but we are very segregated too. If you look at
That's right.
the demographics of our different neighborhoods, on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, we are not a very integrated city. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true that, you know, there were deed restrictions south of Willits that people couldn't sell their houses to black or brown people or Greeks or Jews or whatever. And that's impacted our, you know, residential patterns to this day. So no one else was saying that. So it's up to the Greens sometimes to point
But
it
yeah,
out.
again, we're just not. I just feel like we're the party that represents the people the most.
I do
mean,
too.
and you know, there's numbers we can point to as well. I can still remember one of the first things that Chris said that made me think she's got it, is that a big focus of hers was to motivate more people to vote, to figure out how to do that. And so in my mind, you have to look at the reasons why maybe they don't anymore. And it's like a blinking red light to me. The parties is the thing. Everyone is asked every couple of years to choose between column A and B. And how long is it before you just get tired of those two options? We talked before, if you go to a restaurant and there's two things on the menu, you're not going to go to that restaurant very often. Right? And then,
Right.
and why does that have to be
Right.
a different approach? I mean, you've just got column A or column B, and then it gets worse after a certain amount of time without even really looking into the issues or boning up on, articles in the day. You just know what you're going to get from column A and what you're going to get from column B. And I like to represent the party that could be the alternative option. Options are great. Options are great. Our grocery stores are chock full of options, and I feel like maybe when it comes to policy, we should have something like that too.
The old George Carlin joke, you got 12 milks, you got 5 cars you could pick from, then you got 2 parties. The more important the decision gets, the less options you have.
Oh yeah, we could go on forever.
And
The Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court.
It's up to 9 people. If one of them's out sick that day, the country's in turmoil. Like, come on. Yeah.
So I think, actually, we only have about 10 minutes left. So I want to talk a little bit
did start
about
late,
election. Yeah, that doesn't mean we can stay late.
Darn.
But
We'll just have to do another
yeah,
can do another one.
but I wanted to talk a little bit about the election. November 2nd is election day, and I do have a couple of slides if we can get them up here. And we're not sure this will work to get the slides up on screen. Nope, I guess we're not going to get slides here.
slides.
Okay, well, we'll try it for next week. There has been a ballot drawing, and one thing I did have, but I won't be able to show tonight, but I'll post it, the order that candidates are on the ballot. So for city council, Chris is in the first column. The Democratic candidate in that column is, I believe, Efrain Dominguez. And since it's not in front of me, okay, do we have it? No. Still not, okay.
Marty sees what he's going to be on already. He's
And John Russell.
every election.
Oh, yes.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, this is the ballot. It's a little hard to read, but Chris is D1 and Eddie is D2 and Keith is, it isn't actually 1, I messed that up, it's 8.
Gotcha.
Is D8.
D8, okay.
So both the Republicans and Democrats do have full slates. We want people to understand you can vote for up to 7 of each of these. There's no rule that you have to vote for how you're registered. There's no rule that says you have to vote for all people in the same row. You can vote for up to any 7 of your choice, whatever party they're in, whatever party you're in. Just vote for the candidates you think will do the best job.
Could you go back to the ballot for a second?
Sure.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and we're hoping to continue to educate the public on this, but if you look at it, in the way that I'm in a row, or a column, with Efrain at the top and then John Russell below, and then a couple spaces myself, it almost seems as though you can pick one of...
Right, like it's a head-to-head race.
Right. Okay, you can pick one of us.
Right.
And then in the next column, you can pick one of, looks like it's...
Yeah.
In fact, because you're choosing 7, you can choose everyone in column 1 and column 2 and be okay.
Right.
I'd like
Right.
to lay down a challenge. This is interesting. Do we think that we can rely on the day to communicate this to our citizens?
No.
No, it's really hard.
I know.
Actually, New
Confusing.
York State and Connecticut are the only states in the country that have ballots that look like that. In most states, the candidates are just listed. So in most states, no one will say vote row A all the way or vote row B all the way. But this is a very deceptive ballot that does not intuitively explain to people how they can vote, because it says vote for any 7, but it's a mixed message. The ballot doesn't scream out vote for any 7.
It almost looks like it's configured for you to go across.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's a remnant of the old party lever machines. So we'll put this up
2021.
again and we'll post it. And for more information, I thought I had one other slide, but maybe not. Oh, yes, yeah, okay. Well, we are back to some of the
Resave.
slides are missing anyway, so people can go to our website if they want to find out more about the candidates. There are links from nlgreens.org, and there is a purple QR code that you can use to attach you to a voter survey. If you are interested in learning more, if you're interested in volunteering, if you're interested in getting literature or a lawn sign, that is the QR code that you could go to that is on the website and will be on our candidates' literature. And in the 4 minutes we have left,
Lightning round.
yeah. Well, I just wanted to let people know a couple of things that are coming up. Next Wednesday, which I believe is the 29th of September, we will be in our office up in 312 State Street from noon till about 9 p.m. I won't promise that all the candidates will be there for all 9 hours, but the office will have people in it. And plenty of opportunities for conversation. The lawn signs have been ordered. They will, they're kind of that design. Thank you, Eddie. And hopefully people will be able to pick up information and lawn signs and talk to the candidates and have snacks and check out the really nice, friendly space. We're in Waterford now. There's no mask mandate here, but there is in New London, so inside masks in our campaign office. But we'll have some tables outside too, I think, unless it's raining. Tomorrow's a community meal at Benny Dover, 5 to 6. Sunday is the Somos New London Parade from 2 to 4.
Saturday is the Dream Market. the
Oh,
last one.
Saturday Dream Market, the
Saturday
last one
is the
from 4
final
to
Dream
7.
Market. It is a block party. There's a DJ, and there is a petting zoo, and there is even a salsa station.
Nice.
Yes.
Yes, very nice.
And I'll put in my one other last pitch in our last minute is Saturday, October 2nd in the morning from 10 to 12. There's a Riverside Park cleanup, and we have a lot of plants to put in the ground.
Is there anything happening on October 1st?
I don't remember. I think.
Should.
Oh, tell us
Early
fast. You have
voting.
The
30
beginning of early
Oh,
voting.
yes. You know, I had a slide
your
with
fire.
all of those,
She's killing
and
me.
I lost it. So
That's
next
okay.
week, but you're right. So thank you. We're out of time. Chris and
Thank you so
Eddie
much.
and Keith for being on the show, but even more so for putting yourself out there to run and talk to people. And our shows from now to Election Day will be interviews with candidates from New London, but also from some other towns, perhaps Wyndham or Clinton, where there are quite a few Green Party candidates running. So we will be back on the air every week from now till the end of the year. We'll see what happens then, but we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Anna?
Boom.